Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Riffhard podcast. My guest today is Mr. Joel Stroetzel from Killswitch Engage. He's returning to the podcast, and last time he was on, we had a really cool conversation about how he came up playing guitar and down picking, and just the ins and outs of sounding sick, which I think Killswitch Engage are one of the bands that defined what sounding sick is for the modern age. Like, there's so many aspects of modern metal playing that were kind of, it's not that they invented squeals or that they invented palm muting, but they presented it in a way when they first came out that kind of paid tribute to older metal, but did it in a modern way that really kind of just got the ball rolling. So in lots of ways, I feel like them and Slipknot set the stage for a lot of what was to come after. And I know people listening are going to be like, well, Meshuggah was out at that time and there's other bands. And yes, there for sure. And obviously Meshuggah played a major role in what was going to happen. So, if we start going down this rabbit hole too far, we'll end up with a list of like 15 bands. But as far as the really big bands at that time, which, like Slipknot and Killswitch, I think that they definitely were groundbreaking. So this is an awesome episode. I want to just mention that the camera got a little fucked up in the first 20 minutes. So if you're watching it, just bear with us, it then corrects itself. But the episode was good, so I didn't want to stop it and redo it. And also the brand new Killswitch album is called This Consequence. It's available February 21st, 2025. Let's get into it. All right, Joel Stroetzel, welcome back to the Riffhard podcast.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I was thinking about you recently, actually, before this was booked. So last time you were on, we spent like 45 minutes talking about down picking and about building up speed and also dealing with it as you get older and the reality of it. So I wanted to actually check back in with how you're doing with that, because I have to report that right now, over the past 3 months, I've been hitting like down picking peaks, like peak for like my entire 25 years playing, speed wise, endurance wise. And I think I finally figured out how to practice down picking. There's the thing though that I haven't gotten past is how to not make it go away if you don't do it for like a day or two. I haven't figured that one out, but I'm wondering how you're doing with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's any way around that.
No.
I always kind of find, even like, leading up to a tour or something, if I haven't played through the set a lot, there's two in particular. The song Crownless King always kills me and Adam when we're first starting up the tour. So usually like a week before, I'll start kind of ripping through that one and just make sure the down picking's up to speed. And sometimes I find if you lose it a little bit, it's better to start off just not picking quite as hard, even though it doesn't sound as mean, just to get the speed up first. And then you can kind of dig in a little bit more as you get more comfortable. But yeah, it's one of those things, man. Don't use it, you lose it, kind of.
Yeah. Well, a week is brave, man.
Yeah. Maybe more than a week, maybe a couple weeks. Try to start at least riffing through that song, because I feel like that song's all down picking. So I feel like if I can get through that one, I'm kind of ready to deal with the other songs in the set.
That makes sense, man. I had the ATR guys on. Jason was saying that he starts like a month out to get the down picking together. So my band's tour is literally a month from today. I started because it's our first tour in a long time. I didn't want to be stressed about it, so I started working on this like 2 months ago. I think that the biggest problem is when people wait too long.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I feel like the idea that you should be able to do it like 5 to 10% above the song tempo goes a long way.
Absolutely, man. If you can strive to do it a little bit faster, or then when it comes time to play it for real and it's a little bit slowed down, it's not so stressful, doesn't make your wrist and your elbow cramp up and stuff like that.
Even if it's not perfect.
For sure. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I know a Master of Puppets is a good one to practice too for the down picking. If you can kind of down pick through that one and get through it, up to speed, that's a good exercise. And you get the little string skips in there too. And if you can do it all down pick, I find that's a fun one to practice.
That's at like 220-ish.
It's a quick one. After a couple minutes of it, your hand starts getting tired. So that's always one I try to play along with when I'm trying to kind of build it back up,
Isn't it amazing that a song that old is still basically the gold standard for this technique?
Absolutely, man. I almost feel like that whole record is still the gold standard for metal records in general. It's such a good record.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're not going to need to do too much more with downpicking than what's on that song.
Yeah, I think anything faster than that, you're kind of getting into having the alternate pick territory.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you. I was actually curious on Forever Aligned. I was checking that out, and I can't tell. That one's kind of quick, but I can't tell if you're down picking those riffs or alternate. Like they sound heavy as shit, but I was like, that's like quick down picking.
It's kind of on the cusp, you know
what I'm talking about.
It's kind of fast enough too, where I think it wouldn't really make a huge difference if you did alternate pick it, because it's right on the cusp there of being a little too quick, and but I think you could get away with alternate picking that one. I can't remember what we did in the studio for that one, if it's down picked or if it's alternate picked. That's one of Adam D's tunes, so he did most of the guitars on that one in the studio.
It sounds down picked, but you never know.
Yeah. I'll have to touch base with Adam on that one once we start doing that one live. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I was listening and was like, yeah, that's that's some no joke if you're down picking that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of quick ones on the new record for sure. So I think we always, if it's at all possible to down pick everything, we try to do that because it just sounds meaner, but certain stuff. And there's always little sections where you can kind of cheat a little bit, alternate pick a couple of notes and then go back to the tugging down on the meaner riffs,
So I agree, though there's one thing I've discovered, like I've kind of discovered it a long time ago, but have kind of proven it true to myself, at least for my own playing, is that there's sometimes where it's hard to get the right groove with all downs for certain types of riffs. All right. Before we get back to this episode, I want to take a minute to talk about Riffhard, riffhard.com, not the Riffhard podcast, because this podcast is actually tied to our online school, Riffhard. And if you're new here, it's the world's best online school for modern metal guitarists. We've got hundreds of lessons from guitar players such as Javier Reyes, Jason Richardson, Wes Hawk, Dan Sugarman, Miles Dimitri Baker. Man, I could just keep on going on. Aaron Marshall from Intervals, Mike Stringer of Spirit Box. I'm reading now because I don't want to leave anybody off. Dean Lamb of Arcspire. It just goes on and on. It's like all the best of the best. And you get tons more than just lessons with them. You get instant access when you join, but there's also all kinds of challenges. Like once a month, we do something like 10-day down picking challenge or a 10-day tremolo picking challenge or a 10-day alternate picking challenge where we really guide you through the lessons and make sure that everybody is getting better. We're not just giving you these videos and sending you out into the wilderness to fend for yourself. We are right there with you. We also do 6 songwriting challenges. Like we have a monthly one called King of the Riff, where we give you a brief, like write a Spartan war anthem or write a technical death metal song with like some criteria. And there's prizes that include guitars and cables and all kinds of cool gear. And we also have private Facebook and Discord communities of like-minded and supportive people, no assholes. That's really, really important to include. Now, with Riffhard, you also get a subscription to Nail the Mix. They live under the same site. So in Nail the Mix, you get to learn how to mix metal. You also get access to Buster Otoholm's Beginner's Guide to Recording Metal. So if you're just playing guitar and trying to record yourself, you have a band and you want to make demos for your band members, or you want to make your own demos, but you just can't get them to sound anything but garbage, or you just can't get past the starting gate, it's too complicated, we've got you covered. Buster Otoholm will show you how to do it. And also, if you want to take it further and actually learn how to mix, there's no place better than Nail the Mix over at URM Academy, and that's all included with Riffhard subscription. All right, so if that sounds interesting, you want to check it out, go to riffhard.com. I'll see you there, and let's get back into this episode. There's sometimes where I think that the upstroke helps you lock in the pocket better. Like, even if it's not down, up, down, up, down, up, if it's like lots of downs, but then a strategically placed upstroke, lots of times that can sound more musical than all downs.
Yeah, it can almost bounce a little bit more instead of sounding kind of stiff and forced, you know? So even though I always said like Master of Puppets, like playing that main riff, I mean, I'm pretty sure the way James played it was all down picked. But if you kind of do upstrokes on the notes that are on the A string, it gives your hand a little bit of a break. And since those, since those higher notes aren't palm muted, you don't notice it not sounding mean or anything, because you can kind of cheat a little bit and give your picking hand a break, you know?
Especially if you got strong ups.
For sure. And your string muting's good. You're okay with the string skipping thing going, changing the picking around. It's a good way to kind of cheat, where it's not really like economy picking or anything like that. You're still doing most of it down pick, but certain notes like that pop out on like other strings, sometimes it's nice to change to an upstroke just for those notes. And then when you tugging away at the low string, that's you keep it all down picked. So you still get the mean chugs, and then the non-palm muted notes are a little bit easier they could be more convincing with an upstroke sometimes,
So it'd be like down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down,
like something like that. So yeah, there's definitely ways to cheat a little bit and give your hand a break and have it still sound mean,
It might not be cheating if it sounds better.
Maybe it's not cheating,
Yeah.
But I always say, if that's not the way James played it, it's cheating.
No, I agree. No, well, I mean, in context of Master Puppets, yeah. But I mean, on someone listening on their own riffs, I feel like, don't be afraid to try different picking patterns.
Absolutely, man. It can really open things up, and you can kind of focus on being in the pocket instead of having to down pick everything. So I think as long as the chugs you're doing, if you're getting them to sound the way you want, there's nothing wrong with, doing some upstrokes and stuff to break it up,
Yeah. I think it's about making very intentional decisions and like knowing what it's supposed to sound like and what it's supposed to feel like.
It's kind of the same thing with the other hand too. Like there's certain riffs, like a lot of riffs Adam will play, and like if he writes a riff, he'll write it in one position, and I'll be like, it's easier for me to play it up here with this hand, or to pick it like this, and just it sounds better with my hands when I do it this way. And as long as they lock in together, we kind of figure out the best ways to play the stuff together.
Well, there's a way that it sounds best on recording.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily translate to playing it in real life. Like I've noticed, for instance, like guitar harmonies tend to sound better if both parts or all three parts are on the same string.
For sure.
Generally, if you don't get too high, like if you get if you're on the bottom string and you get too far past the 12th fret, it starts to sound stupid. Yep. But I've just noticed that like if you're on the A string, playing a harmony with like opens on the low string, lots of times it just sounds better to play the harmony on that same string, or at least sticking to wound strings versus wound and unwound. Yeah. But live, I just don't think that nuance matters.
Not so much live, but in the studio for sure, because you can definitely hear like just the different string gauges. Obviously, they resonate differently. So then you run into like intonation issues and stuff. Sometimes if you're playing like something on the the A or D string and the harmony, you try to do the harmony on the G, it's a plain string, so it doesn't resonate the same way, and sometimes you have a tendency to squeeze it too hard and knock it out of tune, and things like that. I think as long as the guitars are set up right and they intonate well, it's always better in the studio to try to do it on the same string.
Yeah, when I was studying orchestration, one of the first things that I remember learning that stuck with me till now is when writing string parts, you have to understand which ranges on which strings resonate more or less, sustain better, all that stuff like matters.
For sure.
To where you know, like if you want a part to be in the background, it makes more sense to orchestrate it to where you're playing in on a weaker range for the instrument, where the stuff that you want more out front, you would put in stronger ranges. And I think that like the way that translates to guitar is the kind of stuff that we're talking about, like make decisions of how this harmony is going to sound best. It'll sound best when the two parts are kind of resonating the same way.
Absolutely. We always try when we're like tracking, overdubs and harmonies in the studio. We always do that. We try it in, a couple positions and see which one pops the most and which is the most in tune, and which strings we can do the vibrato and line them up right with the original part, like things like that. So it really does make a difference,
Yeah, it's, again, I think live, it's more about just what you can play best.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, live, you got to just get through the song and play it as best you can. In the studio, you have the luxury of, punching things in and trying different things and taking the time, to get the parts right and make sure it all translates in the mix. But I mean, like you said, live, it's a little bit different. Like we got to get through the song and play it tight. And like you said, people probably aren't going to hear that subtle of a nuanced thing, where he's just, okay, he's playing it on a different string, and when you're playing that loud through a PA and, in a live situation, I don't really think anybody's going to notice something like that.
They'll notice if you fuck up a transition though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as you're playing the right notes, and I don't think the position matters as much live,
No, I've just noticed there's just more stuff you need to think about. Like, can you make this transition without looking at the guitar? Like, are you going to run out of steam if you play it in this position? Like that,
you're gonna miss the next couple of chords, doing it this way or something.
It's like a different set of priorities, and I don't think that one is superior to the other. It's just different touring
Absolutely, I agree.
Though, have you ever felt like you'll never play the songs better than after you've toured on them for like a year?
Oh yeah, for sure, man. There's times when we're like, just after we write something or in the studio, it's there's songs where we're punching in the same part, 50 times to get it right. And then after doing like a tour, playing it live, like, man, I wish I could record it now, because I'm playing it so much better than I did on the record,
Yeah. Stand-up comedians, that's what they do. Bands can't really do this in our world, but that's what stand-up comedians do with their crowd work. They'll crowd work a special for like a year
before they record it, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It really does. And at those, I've been to one or two crowd work shows where they take your phones, and so it's very rare that will ever end up online, and so they're free to just fuck up and improve the set. And a year later, they're doing the Netflix special, and it's awesome.
Everyone's cheering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine if you could do that with your own songs.
Yeah, I think that the scary thing about trying to do that with metal music, playing it live, like in the beginning, obviously, playing an unrehearsed song, you'd hate to have terrible clammed out versions of popping up on YouTube, and everybody's like, that song freaking sucks. And I think it's the opposite with a metal band. You almost want to hear the effect of the finished version first, and then kind of know what to expect live.
Totally. That's why it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. It's just this nice fantasy of, imagine if you could record your album after you toured on it. How much would it be better?
Yeah, for sure. We kind of had that discussion when we were playing Metal Fest back in September. Like, should we play a couple of new songs? And it's like, well, we don't really, if we don't play them good, then, because we've never played them live, we don't want them to end up all over the internet and blowing it and have people say, wow, the new Killswitch stuff really sucks.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just get them done right and release them to the wild first, and then we can start putting them in the set,
But play them live before anybody ever heard them.
Yeah, something kind of scary about that idea with music,
It
especially metal.
Spiked my blood pressure a little just thinking about that.
Yeah. So we didn't want to get into that, unfortunately, just being like, these guys, their new songs are terrible, man. If we're all screwing everything up, it's, wouldn't want that stuff floating around on YouTube or whatever,
I mean, and there's factors outside your control. Like, what if it just sounds like shit?
Bad sound, gear going out, missing parts. You never know what can happen. So,
Yeah, exactly. Like it's there's so many X factors involved that I think that's better. And honestly, have you ever seen it work where like a metal band does it and you're like, hell yeah, that's great.
I think I can't remember what band it was. I think way back we were on tour with In Flames, they might have played a couple of new songs in their set before the record was out and before they were really. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. Like I don't know these songs. It must have been In Flames, I think, or maybe it was Soilwork. We were on the road with them way back, but those guys are masters, though. They can pull it off.
Yeah. I bet like Opeth could do it, or
absolutely,
Meshuggah could do it.
Absolutely.
I mean, dude, I feel like any of the pro bands could do it. It's just, would they want to?
Absolutely. And then, if somebody's recording it poorly, like how's that going to translate? And is that something you want floating around in the wild before people hear the real song? It's like the studio version, I should say,
Yeah, exactly. It's a good question. So I'm out of curiosity, what are you listening to live in your ears?
Let's see. It's funny, man. I kind of listen to everything, man. In terms of metal, I always go back to the old records that I kind of grew up with. Like I said, the old Metallica stuff.
I mean on stage in your
on stage
in ears.
You meant like different music. Yeah, for in ears, like everybody has a slightly different mix in their ears. Like for me, I like not everything in there, but I kind of like a little bit of the entire kit, mostly kick and snare, and then a lot of my guitar and my vocals for doing harmony stuff, and just a little bit of Jesse in there, and just enough of Adam's guitar where I can hear like if there's like stops in a song where I can hear what he's doing, so I can hit the stops on time. But it's I find it very like I think guitar players that want a full mix that would confuse me like personally, because sometimes with picking and stuff, if I was hearing his down picking, I feel like it would get jumbled with mine. I just kind of need to hear what I'm doing. I think Adam feels the same way. He's mostly like his guitar, kick and snare, so we mostly kind of hear ourselves. I think Jesse might be the only one that has like a real full mix.
That makes sense. And that makes sense.
Yeah. Justin has both guitars in his kit, I think. And then, Adam and I are pretty minimal. We just kind of mainly want to hear our guitars and be able to follow along with the drums,
Yeah. I feel like hearing too much, like, do you use a click?
No, not live. No.
Okay. So I feel like hearing too much, I mean, if you're using a click, hearing too much other stuff can be distracting. Like if you're hearing too many drums plus the click, you could like trick yourself into thinking that you're more on time than you actually are, or if you have too many things going on, like you said with the picking, you might lose track of where your picking's actually at.
Absolutely. It's kind of the same thing when I like tracking in the studio, really, because it's obviously, if you're like, say you're doubling a guitar part or something, you're probably going to want to hear, at least me anyway, I would like to hear mostly the drums and the track I'm working on at that time, and maybe not have all the other stuff there to distract me. So it's kind of the same thing as we do in the studio. I just kind of went, what am I actually playing right now? And am I locked in with the drums? It's kind of the main thing for me,
So sometimes I've noticed in the studio that I don't even want to hear, like sometimes I want to hear the drums, but I might just want to hear them on a loop or because I've noticed that like if I get into the pocket on a riff, doubling it happens by just keeping on going rather than playing it, saying it's cool and then doing it again. I've noticed probably going to get all the doubles or most of the doubles right then and there.
Yeah,
in that take.
Absolutely, yeah.
But other stuff can get distracting. That's the problem.
For sure. Obviously, in the studio, we track clicks for pretty much everything. We don't do that live, but so we're in the studio. It's like for me, mostly drums, the track I'm working on, and the click, and then live, it's kind of the same thing for me, just without the click track. Because we like to kind of speed things up a little bit and keep it a little bit loose live. So we don't, figure if people want to hear the record and those tempos, they can listen to the record. And the live's a little more punk rock, I guess, for us. We just kind of go for it and
that's kind of cool.
Let things happen,
a band that doesn't play to a click live in 2025.
No clicks, no tracks. We've always been like, let's have it be two different things. You want to hear the record, you can listen to the record, and the live show's a little more punk rock, kind of stripped down.
I feel like for what you guys do, that makes a lot of sense because you don't have like 8 million layers. Like,
not really. There's usually like in the studio, all the rhythm tracks are doubled, obviously, but we try to kind of pick and choose what we do in terms of overdubs. Like, hey, how's this going to translate live? We don't want to add 50 guitars to the chorus because what's that going to sound like when we play it live if we're not running tracks? So we try to, sometimes there's obviously like, delay stuff, textures in the background just to make the song sound bigger, but it's not. All the main parts are, pretty stripped down. Like, we got to focus on these live. So let's, have it be the same way on the record for the most part,
Yeah, I've always noticed about you guys that like your song arrangements and your riffs, and I've always actually wondered if this is intentional, but like the songs seem to be arranged to sound good live, like there's a lot of tone riffs. Like you guys have a bunch of riffs that would be amazing to dial tones with because they just sound good. Like they sound good and they sound like they're fun to play and like they just sit on the guitar in the right way to where it's going to pop and sound great live. It seems like you guys have done that so much for so many years that it definitely seems either intentional or really, really lucky.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think it's always in the back of our minds. I don't, like, again, like if we're in the studio and a chorus doesn't sound like as big as we want, like we're definitely not afraid to add some layers as long as they're background things. Like you said, it's really important. Okay, this is the overdub that's happening. That's got to pop out nice and fit in the mix. Obviously, we want the rhythm guitars to sound big. We double all the rhythm guitars and stuff, left and right. But then when we play it live, to make sure it's like, hey, well, how are we gonna pull this off live? So some of the extra stuff doesn't always need to be there, and we try to kind of pick and choose tones, for the parts, So the rhythm tone is the rhythm tone, and the overdub tone's often similar, but usually thinner, more compressed, a little more top end going on. So it just kind of sits in the middle a little bit better. We've been using the Kempers live for a few years now, so it's nice. You can just kind of have a patch with a slightly different amp or a slightly different EQ curve, a little more compression, some delay. Just click on that for the overdub, so it pops out like it would on the record.
Kemper is a beautiful thing.
It's such a good tool to have, man.
Yeah.
As much as I'd love to stand in front of a wall of cabs and have a bunch of tube amps on stage, it's so much less practical these days because I think especially for like metal stuff, those modelers really do kind of excel. They do a good job of the high gain stuff,
The idea that it can sound the same everywhere is amazing.
Absolutely. Consistent. And like, we're all in in-ear monitors, so it's nice to just pop your ears in every night and have it be consistent. And it just takes so many worries away.
Yeah. And you don't get analogued. Like that's what I call when you get fucked over by your gear, like an amp burns out, or you're in the studio and suddenly a fader just doesn't work, or some outboard compressor just decides it's going to sound different, or your tube amp sounds good on some days and not like I've had that with like 5150s where like my old block letter that is an amazing amp on good days. Like on good days, it's like the best amp, but then it's also got bad days where it sounds like shit and I have not figured out what the deal is. So I just chalk it up to I'm getting analoged right now.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes with tube amps too, man, if it's inconsistent stage power, you can get noise, you can get sag, and your tone doesn't cut like it should. And I think having the Kemper really does take that out of the equation. And usually the biggest worry with the Kemper is that if the power goes out, it's gonna take 30 to 60 seconds to reboot, but you're not gonna miss a whole song or two songs trying to plug in another amp and all that stuff. So I do think it takes a lot of the worries out of the equation.
I mean, your tube amps could explode too.
Absolutely.
So I think, have you ever had a meltdown with a Kemper?
Not really. I think maybe once over the years, like our stage right, me and Mike lost power for 30 seconds, but then everything popped back in. That's the worst that's happened, thankfully. But it, again, doesn't happen often. They're usually pretty pretty bomb-proof live, you know.
And you just reminded me of something I should probably buy. A battery, because we're running a laptop with like tracks and click and all that shit. I should probably buy a battery backup.
That makes sense, at least for the laptop, and you know.
Yeah, well, because we're actually using plugins for guitars. We're leaving our quad Cortexes at home and trying to do it all just in a DAW session, because I mean, it really doesn't make a difference. Like, what's in the modelers is just software.
Absolutely.
So it's the same thing. So trying it, but then there's that fear of, if the power goes out, it won't take the computer down, but it could take the interface down, which could then crash the DAW and put us in a world of fucking pain.
Absolutely, man.
Battery backup would solve that.
Battery backup, yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. When did you guys make the switch?
Let's see. It's probably about 8 or 9 years ago at this point. That we've been using the Kempers, and the only reason we really did it was to just make everybody's workflow easier, save some space in the trailer or the truck. And you know, Mike D and I share the bass rigging guitar. We share a pretty small rack on stage. It's just easy. Roll everything up, plug it in, and like we're good to go. So we were hauling around a bunch of amps before, like, you know, half stacks for dirty stuff, combos for cleans, all that stuff. And it's so much more stuff to set up. It sounds amazing, obviously, when everything works, you know. But again, just to, you know, we'd like to kind of roll light if we can, and, you know, just requires less crew, and it's easier for our guys, and we're not as worried about tube amps blowing up, like you said. And it's worked out well for us. It's
a smarter way to exist. It's more I don't know, with the way the world is going and how expensive everything's getting, it makes a lot of sense to try and streamline like that.
Oh, for sure, man. For sure. I don't have to worry about bringing out, you know, fancy, nice tube amps and putting wear on them and having them fall off at trucks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know? So it's, I love all my amps. I'm a total amp dude. I love, you know, all different kinds of amps, but it's nice to not have to worry about bringing them all on the road. Like with the Kemper, you can, you know, do profiles of your favorite tones, and it's, you know, it gets you pretty close. I've heard great things about the quad Cortex too. I've never tried it, but
it's like a different kind of thing. It's great. Kemper. So my experience with the Kemper, and I don't know if it's changed. Like, I got it I got a pre-release model when it first came out. And so a lot of my experiences with the Kemper are from like the first few years. And my experience with it is that it is amazing for capturing stuff. Not great if you're starting from scratch or grabbing somebody else's profile or something. But if you're profiling your own stuff, that's like where it excels. And, you know, you want to use your album tones or something like that. Like, it's pretty much the best for that sort of thing. Quad Cortex is more like if you combine an Axe effects with a Kemper, because it can capture stuff. It does it pretty well too. But I think its ability to do shit from scratch is on a different level. I think that's more its strength.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like there's like a community of people that have like captures and stuff that they've made too. And there's a lot of good stuff out there if you just want to get the unit and get all your stuff online and be ready to go. It's a good option, you know.
And I do think the captures are better than getting other people's Kemper profiles. I've just noticed with the Kemper, like, the profiles are very much specific to the guitar and the pickups that you profile it with.
For sure.
With like the way that the refine feature works.
Yeah, the refine thing. You really got to play through it for a few minutes and open chords, play hard, play light, play some leads, you know, all that stuff to really get it to be convincing. Because if you just run the profiler and leave it be, it's not quite there, you know.
No, but the thing is, the other side of that sword is that the refine is refining it to you. Exactly. So it's very much custom.
Specific to the player, their guitar, their hands, all that stuff, you know?
Yeah. But that's why it's so good. But like, that's why when people get other people's Kemper profiles and are disappointed, I'm thinking, well, you got to understand what a Kemper's good for.
For sure.
Yeah.
Capturing your own stuff, you know?
Yeah.
For sure.
The Quad Cortex. Have you ever used the neural plugins?
I have the Gojira one that I like a lot, and it sounds killer, man. Just for they use it a lot for doing demos and stuff, because I don't have to plug in, just plug my guitar direct in. It sounds awesome. I think I have the there's a Tone King Imperial one that you use for like clean stuff. That sounds amazing too. They make great stuff, man. They really do.
So that's what's in the Quad. I mean, that they will say that it's different, but it's it's other versions of their plugins. Basically, I'm sure there's some slightly different technology, but they now have it to where there are certain ones of those plugins. Like I know they have a version of the Gojira that will work, but it's basically, if you like their plugins, that's what you got in the Quad Cortex.
Nice. Awesome.
I'm not getting paid to say this either.
Fair enough.
Yeah, just making sure everyone knows that. Do you ever fuck around with the software that comes with the Kemper?
Not at this point, actually, but I have a Pro Tools rig that I've had for the last 9 years, and I'm still running the same laptop. So I have trouble now getting my profiles into my computer. So I haven't really been using the software because my computer's too old, and I don't want to update my OS and lose a bunch of plugins and stuff like that. So I'm just leaving it be. What I'll usually do is I'll make profiles. I run a Pro Tools session, run everything like through API plugins, and so I could do a blend and then send it back out to the Kemper for profiling. And then I just save it straight into the Kemper, and then our stage manager, guitar tech Josh, loads them up onto his computer and on the drives for me. So I haven't really been using the Kemper software at all. But
the not updating thing, I understand. I totally understand.
I'm trying to get it to work in my iPad, because they do have an iPad version, but I can't seem to get it to connect to my Kemper. I might need to have him update it first, and then, we'll figure all that out.
I know you guys have worked with Andy Sneap. He was the first person that I ever heard about this never updating philosophy from. I feel like he had the same Mac tower for like 15 years or some shit like that, not updated.
Yep. I have a 2016 MacBook Pro, and it's running good, so I don't want to touch anything. There was one night I was doing something, and I tried to plug in my iPhone to my computer just to
oh dear,
just so I could put some music that I was working on my phone, and it automatically updated my phone, and then like half my plugins didn't work. I'm like, okay. And then the only known fix was to update the OS, so I had to reinstall all my plugins, and it was a big pain in the ass. So I said, I'm just going to leave it be. I'm going to run this thing into the ground before I even think about new software or updating it again. So,
well, I feel like pro musicians and producers don't give a shit too much about plugin updates. If they find something that works for them, they're good. They're good with, because the risk of it not working anymore is too great. Like, because you worked so hard to get to a point where you have a rig that does exactly what you need. For sure. That why fuck with it?
Yep. I have a lot of the Avid plugins that come with Pro Tools are great. I love the Wave stuff, and I have a couple of the soft tube bundles that run with the DSP system I have. So it's like everything works. I'm gonna leave it be, and one day when my computer shits the bed, I'll deal with the whole update thing. But until then, I'm just gonna say, hey, I'm happy with what I got. Everything works.
The cool thing about that is, have you ever, those movies from like when we were kids of like kid like hits his head, wakes up, and it's like 50 years later, and or there's like a different family living in his house. I forget what movies do that, but that was kind of like a common theme with like 80s movies. That's what it's like if you haven't updated for a long time, and then 10 years later you update, and suddenly technology has just done a leap. So like when you do finally do that, I think you'll be very happy with like, where shit's at now.
Well, the one good thing that came out of my system crashing before was when I updated all my plugins and my Pro Tools and stuff, I was able to use the they call it a hybrid engine, because before I have a DSP rig, so before I couldn't play through like any of the Wave stuff or track with any of those plugins, and a lot of the I think even the neural DSP stuff, they're all AAX plugins. So now I can run certain channels, native, and run others DSP, which is not, I wasn't able to do that before. So that was the silver lining once I went through all the reinstalling. Oh, I can do this now. So I guess it was worth the 3 days of hell reinstalling everything. But,
wow. I'd forgot about that.
yeah, the
Older
hybrid
Pro
engine thing's
Tools.
great. Yeah. Because if you have like a DSP tower, in order to like enable it on a record ready track, you have to put a DSP plugin first. And then when you're using like whatever AAX plugin after, you get your latency and stuff like that. So now I don't have to deal with that, which is nice. So that was a unexpected benefit.
Man, I remember old Pro Tools and the latency issues were just horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to like bus tracks.
Yeah.
That was just a mix destroyer. Lots of the people that I like learned from coming up in Pro Tools never did like Sukoff and stuff, never did like auxes and stuff in their Pro Tools sessions. And it's not because they didn't know how they worked or couldn't use them. It was because the TDM systems would do this thing where it'd be working fine, and then suddenly it would just be out of phase. Like the latency would just start shifting. It would just drift over time.
You used to always have that problem. I used to have like a 003, just one of those. And, anytime you're doing like any kind of parallel, bus or something like that, or compressed, all of a sudden it would just, you get a blip and suddenly you're, you got these drum buses that are all out of whack and there's a slap back everywhere and you have to restart your system. So that's one good thing about the DSP thing is you don't really have to worry about that. So especially if you're using the DSP plugins, you can run a ton of them and track right through them and there's no latency. So it's come a long way. But I even think the DSP things are going to, they're not really, the computers are so good now, I don't know how necessary the HDX rigs and stuff are going to be in the coming years,
Well, I only have a laptop now. I have a M3 MacBook Pro. I have been able to run massive sessions on that thing, and keep a pretty low buffer and record into it still without it like crapping out, without any crazy latency. And I'm talking like something like 30 tracks of active amp sims, plus like drums, plus like, orchestra, plus a lot of shit, but like all active.
That's
which
awesome.
Is amazing. Eventually you get to the point where you have to start committing or whatever, freezing, but it's pretty amazing. Like the idea that you can keep the buffer at like 64 and have basically close to a mix
For sure.
and still be recording.
It's insane. Yeah. Things have come a long way.
Yeah. On a laptop.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's kind of a new world. I have a big appreciation for it because even though, we've been running URM for like 10 years now, I only started playing guitar again 3 years ago. I took like an 8-year break from making music when I started URM and Riffhard. And so coming back to it after 8 years, it was like when I stopped, amp sims were just starting to get all right, but they still kind of sucked. Like you couldn't really record at a low buffer into computers. Like you kind of could, but not really.
Yeah.
Like it was a whole other world. And then come back and it's like, wow, well, these neural plugins are fucking amazing. Like computers are powerful. Like these kids don't know how good they've got it.
I know everything's like easier these days, man. I was actually, when I got that Gojira plugin when it came, I was kind of blown away by how good that sounded. Just
right out the gate.
Like, plug straight in. Like, wow, you don't really need to change much on this. It sounds awesome. Just sits right in the mix. It's like just right when you open the plugin. Like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah. I have like philosophically, it's kind of an interesting topic to me because on the one hand, you have people who say, well, you're making people worse by them not having to work for it. But then I think about shit like, well, we use keyboards, not typewriters. Like I'm not riding a horse to work, like
For sure.
driving my car.
Exactly.
And I don't know how the car works. it doesn't fucking matter because I still got here. And yeah, I'm not doing math in my head. I'm using this supercomputer in my pocket. And I remember as a kid, people said if you use a calculator, it's going to make you stupider. But I don't know, man, because I see kids these days and they're smarter than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure I believe that making stuff easier like that makes us dumber. I think it actually allows us to think about the next thing, like the next challenge.
I think it frees up a lot of time to just be creative too, instead of like, oh, I'm gonna set up and do a demo and like, miking up an amp and taking all the time to dial in the tone. But by the time you're ready to go, you don't feel like recording anymore. It's nice to have all these tools at your fingertips, man. Like it's stuff like Easy Drummer, things like that, or the
so good,
or like the neural plugins. You can just plug in and go, man. You have an idea in your head. I want to make a demo, and at the end, you can just pop down to your computer and make it happen, and it ends up sounding great. Sounds as good as a lot of the records out there, just with no effort. So it's kind of crazy, man. Why not use the tools we have, right?
Dude, I love it. By the way, just want to plant a seed about stuff that sounds great right out the gate. I don't know if are you familiar with Bogren Digital? Jens Bogren's
I've
plugin
heard
company.
Of it, man. Did you like the one knob amps and stuff?
Yeah,
plugins. I heard those are great, man.
Yeah, they're shockingly good. Where I was super skeptical because one knob. Like like the one knob plugins from the past were kind of like for beginners and weren't that great. So like I was a little skeptical, but they're fucking great. They just sound awesome, like immediately. It's one knob, but it's Jens Bogren's handiwork. So it sounds great.
Dialed to perfection, man. Just plug it and go, right?
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's, it's even simpler than the neural stuff. I don't think it's like instead of, they all sound great, but the idea that someone did figure out a one knob to where you literally don't have to do anything. You can adjust the gain. You can change IRs if you want, but you don't have to. It sounds great.
Yeah.
Is amazing. And like you were saying, you used to spend so much time setting stuff up and burning calories on that brain RAM. Like not to have to worry about that doesn't mean you're going to work less. It just means you can now focus on the next thing.
For sure.
Yeah. Which is why I think mixes now are getting so fucking good, and also why players now are so damn good is a lot of stuff that used to take a lot of time just doesn't anymore.
Yeah, and focus on playing and being creative and not have to worry about the dirty work leading up to it.
No, it's not like they're not practicing.
For sure.
Do you see the new generation of guitar players and get bummed or get excited?
I don't know. I think it's kind of an exciting time. I think most of the people are excited about the stuff that's out there. I mean, obviously there's going to be the old school guys that are going to shit on it. It's like, no, man, you need a half stack for dirty stuff. You need a Fender amp for your cleans. You need all this, it's not the same. It's not the same. And I'm sure it's definitely not. I think when you're sitting in the room, like, you can't really replace the feel of sitting in front of a tube amp and the experience of that. But like we were saying earlier, like if you're just doing like recordings or demos, like I really think, especially for metal stuff, there's so many great options out there where it's just easy, man. It's convenience, and I don't think there's any shame in using the tools that we have,
No, and I mean, if you think about the old school way of doing it, people weren't making albums while they were writing stuff also, right? So they were writing stuff for however long it took, and then going to the studio, and that's an event that would take months and months out of their lives, and who knows how much money, like a lot of money, but it was not, sometimes they'd write in the studio, but like, it was definitely not a thing that you do every day, and a thing that you could do every day and work on year round and be working towards this finished product. So I think there's this trade-off to where, as opposed to having it be this thing that you do once every 2 years and you have this amount of time to get it done, and that's that. Now you have all year,
for sure,
every day, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, It was like doing our last record. It was nice to just be able to kind of chip away at stuff at home, or we rented out a small room, a little studio room, and just kind of built a rig in there, so we could just chip away at guitars and stuff like that. And it was pretty low stress, And obviously, for doing drums, the guys like to rent a nice room and spend a week,
of course,
getting awesome drum tones. But for doing guitars and vocals, like, you really don't need to be in a studio to do that stuff anymore. If you got a good signal chain, a good mic, a decent, place that doesn't have a million reflections, you can just do stuff at home, and it's just as good these days.
Makes literally zero difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So do you track yourself?
I like to track with Adam when we're doing guitars.
That makes sense.
Because
why wouldn't you, if you have him as like your partner?
Sure.
As well.
He's a good stickler as far as doing the quality check and making sure everything's up to stuff. But stuff, overdubs, or like if I could do backing vocals or do a guitar solo or something like that, I'm like, hey man, I'm just gonna go home and do it, and I'll send it to you, and you can pop it in the mix. If you don't like the tone, you can reamp it. It's just easy, because sometimes I don't really like sitting there and throwing shit at a wall trying to get a guitar solo done. I feel like that's a waste of time. For us, like, that's some, okay, this part needs a guitar solo or an overdub here. It's just easy to go home and work on it on your own time, and you can piece it all together after,
Yeah, I totally agree. Lots of times, man, back in the old days with tracking solos, a lot of the time would be spent with the guitar player by themselves anyways. And I remember lots of lead guitar players that I recorded, or just like thinking back to like the 007s and 008 years and all that. Lots of time, like I remember going into the studio and the producer would teach the lead guitar player how to punch themselves in or loop record or whatever, because they're not going to be able to think faster than this guitar player about certain things. So
certain thing, like even like I said, in particular, recording lead stuff, which Adam and I don't do a ton of, but it's I don't always like to sit around and try to write leads out. I almost more like I'd rather just hit record a bunch of times and just jam over it, throw some shit at the wall, and like, okay, that's an idea. I'll go back and play that a little bit better, and just do that a bunch of times until I get something I like. And it's just easy that way, and it's just nice to be able to do that stuff at home.
I agree. So like I got over a mental block recently about tracking myself. I had this idea that tracking myself was torture. And I think I had that idea because a long time ago, before record labels and all that, we, tracked ourselves, and I fucking hated it. And it was so stressful. But then I thought about it and I was like, actually the mixing part is the part I hated. The tracking myself, not so much. I just need to not let myself go down rabbit holes.
For sure.
Negative mental rabbit holes. Like, like if something's good, accept that it's good. So once I came up with like a method for not letting myself go down these rabbit holes. And what I mean by rabbit holes, for people wondering, is like you record something and you don't know if it's good or bad. And the more you try to fix it, the less you know. And then before you know it, hours have gone by and you've lost your warmth because you're like working on this micro section and it's not better, and your ears are shot and you're stressed out. So that's the thing that I wanted to avoid by having a good engineer or producer. And I figured out that the way to get around that is to loop record, and then just comp shit, loop record and comp shit. And then don't question it. If something's not good enough, just loop record that section again and go with first impression, like yay or nay. Don't question it. Just simple. If there is a question, there is no question. If you're questioning if it sucks, it sucks. But if you're not questioning it, if you were cool with it, it's highly likely that it's good. And if you're still not sure, send it to one of your bandmates that you trust. Just don't go down the rabbit hole.
Exactly.
If you sense yourself going down a rabbit hole, bring in a trusted ear.
For sure. That's why I always like tracking, especially rhythm guitars. I really like tracking.
Yes.
Because he's just got great ears, and he's very honest. He's like, all right, man, that was close, but you're a little behind. You're a little ahead. You're a little out of tune. Like just in stuff that it's nice to not have to worry about it. Just sit there and play. And he just kind of punches me in and out until it's right, you know?
He's a fantastic producer. So
he really is, man. He's like lightning fast with Pro Tools, and it's very easy. So I like not having to make moves, because I think as far as tracking in the studio, the part that we're most concerned with having like the most precision is really the rhythm guitars, like getting everything laser beam in tune and getting those tight. And then, you know, once that's done, like the overdub stuff and the lead stuff, those are the fun parts, you know, where you can be a little loosey goosey on some of that stuff, and it doesn't have to be right with the drums or click, or it's not, you know, it's a little more forgiving. But like when you're doubling rhythm parts and you're tuned down, it's nice to have a couple sets of ears just for the quality check, you know?
Well, there's like I feel like there's a physical limitation to what your brain or your ears can handle as far as how much input it's getting. So when you're playing, you're you're feeling vibrations through your body. If you're not super loud, you're hearing pick noise, which can trick you into thinking that you're playing more percussively than you actually are. You're hearing what's coming through the speakers. So like you're not, and then you're also focused on playing it right. So you might not have a very accurate picture of what it sounds like while you're actually tracking. And I think that that's why it's good to have a producer or an engineer that you trust working with you on rhythms, because, you know, if you're chugging, like it can start to blend together. And then also those things I just mentioned about how you can never really know what you sound like while you're tracking. It definitely helps to have someone you trust.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Someone you trust being key.
Yep. Indeed.
So we're just about out of time, man. I want to thank you for taking the time, and good luck with the new album. I'm sure it's going to crush.
Thank you.
For everyone listening, it's called This Consequence. It's out February 21st, 2025. We're now in January 2025. Crazy, right?
Yeah, man, it's insane.
Yeah.
Can't believe it's been 6 years since our last record. So we're psyched to get it out there. We're long overdue for some new stuff.
I've only heard one track, but like the first thing I thought was like, it made me happy. Like it made me smile because it's kind of furious. And I was just thinking, I guess last thing I'll bring up was I remember when we were growing up, bands who had been around for 20 years were considered old timers, and you would hear the new records and they would sound tired. But I feel like nowadays we have bands that we all know and are friends with or are in that have been around for 30 years or more. And they're like, in some ways, doing their best stuff ever. Like, not that the old stuff wasn't great, but like they're hitting new highs, and they have like this intensity it's not forced. It's not geriatrics, nothing like that. They're fucking totally, furious still.
Totally, man. It's like a Testament. They're cranking out awesome records. Crowbar, still, I've loved Crowbar since I was a kid. Those guys are still making awesome records, like killing it live. You know, there's a lot of bands out there have been doing it for a long time. Anthrax, you know.
Yeah, it's awesome. I feel like there's something different these days about maybe it's the internet, maybe it's people's lifestyles or something, but like people are aging slower. I think that's got to be some part of it. Anyways, man, have a great rest of your day and have a great release. And thank you.
Thanks so much, man. Always nice talking to you.
For sure, man. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.